How exciting. Welcome out there in YouTube land as well. I'm just really glad that you're here this evening, and you're in for a really interesting conversation with Mario Anaya. He is in charge of all everything that happens in our community, especially with housing and with our encampment and just so many things. I've learned so much from him, and so I'm really excited that you're here to hear him and all of your questions that you might have about. I ran into some people out there. I said, come on in, what's going on in the city, but this will more on a different night. Maybe that's an issue, but plan on being here if you're not here tonight. And thank you for you returning. And I'll turn the time over to Mario.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for the kind words and for the introduction. And yes, thank you. For those of you that are here, it's a Monday night and there's a lot. I know everyone's busy. So to come here on a Monday night and hear me, I'll try not to put everyone asleep and get everyone out in time for dinner still, and hopefully answer any questions you have towards the end. I'm going to give a brief presentation of what the Community Development Department at the City of Tulare, what we do, what we oversee, some of what we do day to day, and some of the things we're responsible for. And then I'll definitely welcome any questions from those of you here in person. And if we receive any, I guess we can receive some maybe online potentially, or no? Oh, okay, that's okay. They're always welcome, and I understand it's being recorded. So even if somebody watches this after we record it, if there's ever any questions, and that's, as you know, we're public servants, so a big part of it is questions, especially after those of you that hear me give this talk, and now you understand kind of what our department oversees and what we're involved in. Any questions, if we can ever be of help, if you have any ideas, a lot of what our department does is in partnership with the community, and hence the name Community Development, and I'll describe a little bit of what that entails. But again, thank you for the time and the attention. And with that, I'll give a brief introduction on who I am and what our department does, and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the things we're working on in the city overall. But so my name is Mario Anaya. I was born and raised in Tulare County, graduated Tulare Union High School, and I moved away after a lot of my generation. A lot of the thought was you kind of have to leave to do something with your life. I'm glad that's kind of changing now. But I did leave. I'm going to school at UCLA, and while I was studying, I thought I was going to be a doctor. I had internships here at the hospital when I was in high school and all that. But you know, I was the first in my family to go to college. I grew up on dairy farms, working on dairy, and I didn't know much about careers, and I liked health, and I was like, well, maybe I'll be a doctor. And like half the kids that go to UCLA, they all think they're going to be doctors, but it didn't quite work out. But while I was at a big university like that, I was exposed to a lot of different areas of study, and it was in taking a public policy class. You know, just trying to see, okay, well, what am I going to finish my major in, or what are some things? I was just trying to graduate at that point. And I liked the public policy class. I was always really good at both geography and social studies. I remember social studies I was always really, even though I thought I was going one direction, kind of where I was meant to end up, ended up working out because I liked the public policy class. And as part of that class, they had only one class session on that talked about urban planning. And I was like, what's urban planning? And right around that time, it just so happened. I mean, timing, right? Sometimes with things, UCLA had just started. UCLA has a great master's graduate urban planning program, but they don't have a bachelor's. But what they did is when I was there, they had just started a minor in urban planning. So the same classes as the master students with, I mean, I have professors that have written books. I have, you know, some of their books. It was really a great opportunity, you know, for a kid who grew up on a farm to learn about how cities basically are built and how they develop. And and right after I graduated, it was interesting. My major was actually global studies. It had nothing to do with urban planning. It was international. I mentioned geography, right, and social studies. So it was international relations, basically. It was geography, economics, and political science, but all focused on international development. I thought I wanted to work for like the UN or to be like a global international business person. And And so I actually, through that, I got to study in Paris when I was in school, which was amazing. But they always say when you travel and you go elsewhere, sometimes you find your home or you kind of reflect back where you're from. And that totally, going to another country, not speaking the language, I found it was just another country that had a lot of the same issues that ours did. Not only that, while I was there, especially as a poor student, I used transit to get around, and it was amazing to hop on a train and like travel all over the place. I could walk around. I mean, the architecture, those urban planning classes for my minor, I was out there. And when I came back, I wanted to walk everywhere. I started noticing, I didn't know there was an ice cream shop here. So I just got very interested in the built, what they call the built environment. Um, and as when I graduated, I had an internship with, it's called the LA County Metro. They run all the buses and the trains in Los Angeles County. And at the time, they were building a new train line out to East LA. So I got involved in that, and I got to see, like, got to go into the tunnels where they're building the subway and like get exposed to all that. And in the office, I got to talk to the engineers that were involved in the planning, the planners, as well as like the people I was helping was to do outreach with the businesses that are affected by the construction, making sure they can stay open, making sure we're doing marketing for them, and making sure, there's a lot of stuff being constructed in town. And so just making sure that construction progresses, but that we help the businesses that are impacted by that construction. So through all that, I was like, I think urban planning, I think this is what I want to do. And I didn't know how, but I was like, I'm going to try it as a career. I like it as an area of study. And I was fortunate graduating into the written things I was going to do. Those jobs were not hiring. In fact, I had a lot of friends, unfortunately, that were laid off during that time because that's when the recession happened. So I was just trying to get a job just in general. And I tried coming back home. I applied for jobs here in the Valley. And then I was like with cities, fortunate to get a job with a consulting company that did planning, specifically environmental and transportation planning. And so they did a lot of work for Metro where I was an intern. And so I did that for 10 years out in LA. I got to work on a lot of really cool projects. And now when I go back are built like train lines, freeway interchanges, did some affordable housing projects as well, development. Um, it was exciting, being young, being in the city and like working on all these cool I learned a lot, learned project management, learned how to do a lot of things that I never thought I'd be doing. Um, and then I went back to school to get my master's because I was always being called to, in that job, I was always kind of behind the scenes, very much project management focused and kind of report writing. And my favorite part of those projects, because those are 10, those projects go on for 10 years, just the planning, the design, everything, all the studies, the environmental studies. A lot of people don't know that, but a big infrastructure project takes a lot of time from when it's an idea to getting it designed, getting all the studies done, getting it approved by the planning commission, whether it's the city council or the board of supervisors, and then construction takes a while. So it don't get built because it takes so long. And that's just, I think, in general, the way this stuff works. But my favorite part of the job was when we would go to community meetings. I remember working on a train line in the East San Fernando Valley and going to like a school site and like having all the parents. And then because I'm bilingual, I would also help translate the meetings and just getting involved like that and actually talking to people. That I really enjoyed. And so I was like, I think I want to get back. I want to work for the public sector. I want to work for, I was a consultant to a lot of cities, but I was like, I think I want to work for a city or I want to work in government again. And so I went back to school, got my master's of public administration with an urban planning concentration. And um, a few years after that, saw there was an opportunity here in Tulare, right when Tulare was going through a lot of challenges. And I remember going to dinner with some friends I went to high school with. They're like, oh man, it's all over the headlines or whatnot. And I don't want to get political. And I was like, you know what? I'm not running for office. I'm not doing any of that. I'm like, well, maybe I can help the community because that was always believe it or not, I always wanted to come back and give back to the community. First, I thought I was going to be as a doctor, but now I'm like, well, maybe this is something that the community needs. Who knows, right? My skill set. So yeah, I came back. I was really fortunate that at the time, the director and deputy director of the department, they took a chance on me and hired me as a planner here in Tulare. So that's about a little over 6 years ago now. And yeah, I hit the ground running. They gave me some projects, Tulare is almost twice the size of what it was when I graduated high school. So it's been growing very rapidly. It continues to grow rapidly. That's kind of my story, how I ended up back in Tulare, and been working very hard, but with a great team of people here. Um, and over time, got promoted. It was only about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years, that got moved to focus solely on economic development. The Department of Economic Development as well during that time. And so they needed a new director. They had asked me initially, and I said, no, I don't think so. I'm happy doing my planning thing. I don't, I don't think I'm ready for that. And, recruiting, that's another thing in the Valley. Not a lot of people study urban planning or some of these things I've talked about, right? Or aren't exposed to them. So we don't have as many people as in the big cities to do this. So it's hard to attract people to do these jobs for government. I understand that now. And so I agreed. I was like, okay, I'll serve in an interim role until we can hire somebody, right, to replace Tracy. And I did it. They convinced me. They're like, you could try it out. We could try you out. And 6 months later, I was like, oh gosh, this has been really hard. I'm learning a lot, and I'll explain why. Because I just told you all other divisions that I had to really get up to I have really great people in my department. I feel like I have a great team. Most importantly, I feel a lot of support from our city management, from the city council, and my peers. The other thing too that's great about Tulare, being in big organizations, we work across departments. We collaborate together. I'm going to talk a little bit about how my department does that too. And so it's awesome to have that collaboration and to be able to just go to a colleague in our department and work something out as opposed to, having to go through a chain. So yeah, I've been the director now officially for about a year and a half, I believe. And I'm still learning, still growing into this. But like I said, I've got really great people, great support. And so let me get into a little bit of what community it's responsible for the growth, the development, and the continuing, I would say, thrivance or the continuing quality of life of the city. And so, well, what does that mean? That means it starts with planning. So I have a map of Tulare, and so that's really what we oversee in planning. So there's three divisions. There's the planning division, the building division, and the housing and grants. And so planning is looking at how many of you are familiar with the term zoning or zoning map, the general plan. But the general plan is the long range planning document for the city that has all the policies, the goals. Hey, for the next 20 years, 40 years, here are some goals we have as a city. Like we want to create a business park here, or we want to expand retail in these areas. We need more housing, or we need more apartments. Okay, where do we put apartments? And so the zoning map essentially identifies areas in the city. If I had it up right now over this map, you'd see all these different colors, and each color represents a different zone. And so one color, like yellow, is like, okay, this is single family homes. Red, that's commercial. This is where we're gonna have commercial development. And one interesting thing, and not to go too nerdy, it really kind of came into focus really after World War II. If you look at older parts of our neighborhood, older neighborhoods in our city, you tend to see where you do have maybe a house next to an apartment building, and maybe there's a shop at the corner. And it's interesting. We're doing kind of going back to that now, because one of the things that I think our planning staff tries to be conscientious of, one thing we have in the Valley, it's not just in Tulare, but all Valley cities, is a lot of sprawl, and sprawl, not one of the things with sprawl is you create situations like we get calls all the time, like over by Mission Oak and kind of that neighborhood where you have a lot of new housing. Folks are like, we need a grocery store here, or we need more commercial services because everyone has to drive up to Prosperity for everything. And the folks on the west side, the same thing. We don't have a lot of commercial options. We were really fortunate Superior opened when Palace closed down, that they purchased, you can imagine for folks that maybe don't have access to a car, how difficult it would be to have to get all the way across town to get groceries or to, run basic errands. And so one of the things we're trying to do as we grow out is making sure we're creating whole communities that have access to commercial services, that have access to schools. But yeah, planning is looking at, as we grow, how do we grow? Where do we grow? In which ways? And then one of the things we do whenever we have developers propose projects, whether commercial or residential, the developer, they're responsible for it's essentially it's a financial transaction. They pick up land at a certain cost. there's certain costs that they have to pay to develop, right? Whether it's relocating utilities or anytime even any housing division is built, for example, there's a lot of costs that a development company, a home builder or developer has to put in. And then what they're hoping is that they'll improve the land and be able to sell, whether it's a house or rent out a business pad to a chain and start recouping some of that and turn a profit. We want them to turn a profit. Profit is not bad. We want our development community to make money and be successful so that they can roll that into another project and the community continues to grow. Where me and my staff, though, so we kind of have to be that balance where we want the project to be successful and profitable. So we can't have all these regulations and all these things that are so overly burdensome that the project just does not pencil. It doesn't, there's too many costs, there's too many delays, too many regulations where now they're not able to build and make money. But on the flip side of that, my staff, we always say, that's a short term, development has to be short term because they have to roll those profits, put it into another project. As city staff, we more so represent the residents that exist now and those that are to come. In planning, we always say you kind of have to be a little optimistic. You always have to have some hope because you're ultimately planning communities where the folks that are going to live there and use the infrastructure and live in that community, they may not be born yet. And so we're planning for the future. We're planning for today, but we're also planning for the future families that continue to grow and be born in Tulare. And so we're looking long term. So we have to tell the developer, no, we need a crosswalk here, or we need this bike lane, or we want parks and open space for families to take their kids and all the things that don't necessarily always make money functions for the residents. Also think of visitors, right? If we want people to invest in our community, we want a nice community where when someone comes in, they're like, wow, this is a really well thought out community. You all have, places for people to gather. The transportation system works. It's efficient. So these are a lot of the things we look at in planning, and we enforce those through policies, through our codes that have everything from, whether it's walkability or the design of something, making sure that as we grow and we develop, that we do it in a way that is uh, comprehensive, yes, but also very much looking at the future and making sure that, like a lot of people, for example, point to Delago, right? Delago has a big park, there's a school, has different types of housing. There's single family homes, there's also duplexes. I'll zoom in on this thing. But anyway, I remember when I was still in school here in Tulare, growing up, that was barely being planned. This was all, farmland back then. And so Delago has been so successful because it's a specific plan. There was a specific plan that was put in place to develop the way it is today and included the commercial spaces that are close to it now. Like that Quesadilla Gorilla and the Component, those places are thriving. And they're only there because there's a place for them to locate because there's commercial space next to those homes. The parking is a whole nother matter, but that's something else we need to look at too in planning. And so I guess my point is that a lot of what we do behind the scenes in planning, we're the first ones that get involved when projects are first being imagined or designed. And it takes years to maybe see that built out. And the community will always see kind of what the end result is. But a lot of folks don't know that there's all these processes that are in place. So there's staff reviews the plans that the developer puts together to make sure that they're consistent with our codes, our requirements, our policies for good planning. And then there's also environmental studies typically that have to be done. And those are, could take some time, and they have to look at all these areas that how is the project going to affect the air quality or, even traffic or any number of things. And so the development, before it can be approved, they have to have all these studies done. And then it'll come to planning commission. So planning commission oversees a lot of what we call in the municipal code, the zoning ordinance. It's chapter 10, and that's all of the development standards. And so the projects will come before the planning commission. And if it's certain projects, the planning commission approves. So if it's a conditional use permit, if it's a subdivision map, planning commission approves. And then there are more legislative actions is what we call them, that like a zone amendment where you're changing the zoning on a piece of land, or a general plan amendment, you're changing general plan designation, for example, or an annexation, that all has to go to council. And so in those cases, planning commission makes a recommendation for or against, but ultimately council has the ultimate decision on that. And so we get involved again at that early stage with planning. Once projects go through, they're entitled, they're approved. Well, now they'll hire architects and engineers to develop all the construction plans and the building plans to actually build the homes, to build the business park, anything that we're building. And so our department, that's where the building division comes in. And if you walk into City Hall on the first floor, my staff, I have great staff up front. They're the permit technicians and the permit center coordinator. They're there to assist folks that are applying for those construction permits or turning in plans to be reviewed by us. And so they're crucial in that process of going from plan and concept and approval to now actually like plans that are going to be ready to be built. And so they oversee telling folks, this is what you need. This is what you need to fill out on your application. These are the types of plans we need to review. And then taking those plans, city staff reviews those plans, and it's not just my department. So planning and building review those plans, the construction plans. Our engineering department also reviews for engineering requirements. They go to our fire department to make sure they meet fire code, all of these things. And we coordinate that process. And when those plans are all approved, there might be some back and forth. They might need to make changes. But once they're approved, then the permit is ready to be picked up, any fees that need to be paid, and then the permit's issued. That means, all right, you can start construction. I'll try to sprinkle this talk with a few little tidbits. I always tell people, even if we only get a few people here, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, because now you know a lot of information that they may not know. But please pass on kind of what I'm sharing. And one of them is that I think is hopefully easy to remember, but we always get quite a permit for this. Or what do I need a permit for? What don't I need a permit for? I don't know if people like the answer, but generally you pretty much need a permit for everything unless you're doing just changing out the flooring, painting the inside, but anything where you're starting to mess with the electrical or moving the electrical around, plumbing, even obviously roofing, any of the roofings, solar installations, all those require permits. And so the building division, they're responsible for, like I said, taking in the plans, the applications for those permits. We all review them as a team. When the permits are issued, we have building inspectors that they go out on the job site when the homes are being built, or even if you're doing a patio addition or you're putting in a pool in your house, those things all require permits. And the permits really are there to protect you as a homeowner, as a property owner, to make sure to protect your investment. You're hiring contractors to do this work, or whether you're doing it yourself, and buying the materials and doing the work, but you want to make sure it's done right and it's done to code. And so our building inspectors and our building official, they're experts in what's called the California Building Code. And so that code dictates, it's got safety standards on how to build things, right? Like all the requirements for everything from electrical to insulation to you name it. It's very detailed. I am amazed. Those guys, so they start in the morning and the afternoon, they're in there and they're always studying, or they're always bouncing questions off each other. Like, hey, I saw this in the field. How would we? So there's constant education. The other thing too is the building code changes every 3 years. So it's on a triennial update. And so there's things they have to keep learning because now the code has changed. So they spend most of the day out doing inspections for like patio additions or a new house, a new business that's going in too. It's also benefit to the business community. So it's beneficial to you as a property owner if you hire a contractor to do the work yourself to make sure it's done right. And part of it, which we see on the back end, is if you ever want to sell your home, or let's say you want to take out a loan against the home or something like that, and you want to have it appraised, the appraisal companies and the banks and the lenders always check with the city to make sure that everything was done with permits, to make sure that when they're evaluating the value of the home, that if there was an addition done, for example, if it was done with permits, it's legal. And so they can count that into the valuation of the home. So it protects, if you're going to put in that kind of money to do a project in your home, you want to make sure it's done right so that you get, you see the benefits of that investment, if that makes sense over the long term, if you stay there or if you look to sell it. And it's the same with our business community. Our business community, when someone opens a new business, we schedule inspections with the fire department and the building department. And in that case, they're looking at mostly fire life safety issues. So making sure that the entrances are clear and open the way in case of an emergency. Our building department checks accessibility. There are actually lawyers that go around and sue businesses if they don't have the right slope, or if someone in a wheelchair is going to have any issues there, and they're just frankly opportunists. And so our staff will work with our businesses and let them know, hey, we're doing this inspection because once you open your doors to the public, who knows who can walk through those doors. And so as a business, you want to be protected. You want to make sure you have the right fire exit signs and, you're compliant with all that stuff. But that's a lot of what we do is we help folks understand we have all these regulations we have to comply with. We're kind of that interface of helping, making sure our community is built safely, and is protected. And so that's building. And then on also housing and grants is part of our department. And housing and grants has a lot of demands on their time. But they're looking at everything from really quality of life is the way I see it. Because they oversee a lot of programs. So the city receives what's called the Community Development Block Grant every year. It comes straight from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that source of funding can be used for any number of things. It can be used for programs that provide assistance to folks, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's homelessness assistance and outreach, right? But it also helps with infrastructure. We've used it and especially the older parts of town where we don't have sidewalks or the utility lines are old and need to be replaced. We can invest those dollars for infrastructure as well. It's the most flexible source of funds we have, but we use it I like to say, to reinvest in our older neighborhoods, as well as help people that are just starting their lives in Tulare and maybe buying their first home. We have, like, for example, we have home grants as well, and we have what's called a first-time home buyer program that somebody, as long as they meet the low moderate income qualifications and they're on the waiting list to receive down payment assistance, for example, we have staff in housing and grants that administers how those dollars are funneled out to assist different households. We received the encampment resolution funding in housing and grants, and that's been very successful. It's been a lot of work. A big priority, not only in this community, but many others, is how do we address and how do we mitigate homelessness? And it affects everyone, in so many ways, right? Our community, for some people, they're thinking, well, I don't want, there's homeless people out there. They see it, they just think it's blight. But then we also have to understand that these are human beings and there are certain needs that they have, and everyone's at a different place. Everyone's got different challenges. I've had family that have been homeless, and it's how do we work within, I always say our department is responsible for providing housing and livability for everyone from our unhoused neighbors all the way to the person living in a luxury, huge, big house somewhere. And we're responsible for providing housing and programs for the full spectrum, which is a lot. But again, we have really great staff. They're all very well qualified, and we work with our partners, right? So in housing and grants, we work with a lot of federal partners for federal grants, state agencies. The encampment resolution funding came from the state. And there's a lot of good that's come out of that. We've moved folks off the railroads. We had a number of suicides along the railroads, and really what it's doing is it's trying to meet people where they are. So even just the food service, one of the biggest things is the case management and having folks that are trained as social workers and that are professionals in that field meet with folks and build a rapport and a relationship and find out, like, I try to do that when I'm out and I see somebody like, hey, I've seen you out here for a little bit. Tell me your story. It starts with that. Like, how did you grow up in Tulare? Just getting to know somebody, because a lot of these folks have been put out on the streets, and whether their family has kind of kicked them out, or they lost somebody in a relationship, or they were, incarcerated for most of their life. So this is the first time they're by themselves. And it's like, the state just says, hey, you're out now. Here are your things. Good luck out there. And it's like, when you've never been, when you've never had to figure out how to get a job, let alone an education or any of that, it's pretty tough. And so sometimes it's just finding out. Like, I remember even when I was in LA, I'd be waiting for the train. I'd talk to someone and like, hey, well, tell me about you. Like, how'd you, just having that curiosity. And it's almost like I feel like a lot of these folks, they're so used to people not wanting to see them and just not wanting to engage with them as people. That it starts with that. It starts with, hey, you're a human being. I see you. I recognize you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you? I'll tell you a little bit about me. And just having that. And it's amazing what that does, right? But you need services and programs to start that and then go beyond that. And then it's like, okay, great. Now oh, you had a job. Really? Tell me, like, oh, so you have these skills. Like, I remember I met people that have had all kinds of skills. And it's like, well, how can we get you back into the workforce, and how do we get you housed? And it starts with taking care of someone's basic needs, because if someone doesn't have a roof over their heads, they don't have food to eat, or they have, serious behavioral health needs or something else, you can't, you have to take it one step at a time and address those basic needs first. And then once you've done that, now there's all kinds of opportunities to start opening up, right? Now you have some stability. You have a place to lay your head at night. Now you can enroll in job training or a sobriety program or, whatever your need may be. But all those programs take a lot of people power. And of course, that is not cheap. And so we do the best we can to leverage the funds we have as a city and find other opportunities with our federal and state partners and regional partners to create programs and create solutions. And it's with services and programs. Housing and Grants oversees all the contracts for services and programs. And one of the things we want to work at is Alexis and I, who's a member of my staff, talk about how do we best do this. But integrating housing and grants with planning and start thinking of the next step is like, okay, housing and services and programs for people, but then how do we create housing opportunities too in a housing pipeline for everyone? We're building a lot of houses, but we also need more apartments. Not only do we need apartments, some of those apartments may be for someone that went through the spectrum of being formerly homeless. Now they've transitioned and now they still need some services until they're fully independent. And so Housing and Grants is responsible for administering a lot of those programs. I mentioned first-time home buyer as well. So there's a lot that they oversee, and it's a small staff, and so I'm very grateful for them. But we continue to, as the city grows, these needs and these challenges grow, right? And so that's essentially a lot of what my department does, everything from planning concepts out and how development's going to work and doing studies, working with the development community to actually making sure that as we actually have things built in the city, that they're built safely and correctly. And then as our parts of our city age, or as we have people in our community that have special needs and, challenging circumstances, we also take care of them. So you kind of are looking at folks from, new people coming into town, investing money in our city and in our neighborhoods. And then through that process, and then on the back end too, right? And one of the things I'm very passionate about is, unfortunately, one of the things with sprawl is a lot of times, and you'll see this, and I always use Fresno as an example because to me it's easy, because I don't know, I'm visual and I can see it. And I always tell the story of sprawl in Fresno as look at the malls. So there was Manchester Center was built, and that started taking all the new houses and the new schools started being built outside the downtown. Then there was, I think it was Fashion Fair or one of the ones along Shaw. So then all the money, all the schools, all went north. And then now it's up on the river, and now there's River Park, and that's where all the good schools are, and that's where all the new businesses are. And that's good. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but you have to be cognizant to make sure that as you're doing that, you're not leaving behind areas that are disinvested in. Because if everyone's picking up and everyone who can afford the new houses and to send their kids to the new, better schools, then what happens to our existing neighborhoods and what happens to our existing schools? They get underfunded. And so we have to find a way to, as we encourage new development, making sure we're taking care of our existing neighborhoods too. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time and interest. I have a map here and I can show you some of the strategies we employ, but I've been talking a lot and I wanted to start by just giving a big general overview of what we do in community development, which I believe is the focus and kind of the intent of this conversation. And then I can get more into specifics. Like one of the things I had to do, for example, our housing element's being updated right now. And it was actually a very tedious and difficult well, I shouldn't say difficult. It was tedious and a lot of work, but it was also very enjoyable to me because what I did is I basically broke the city up into neighborhoods. And then I had to write a narrative on what is our strategy and what are we doing in each neighborhood to improve those neighborhoods. And they look different for different parts of town, as you can imagine, right? So there are different things that on the west side, there are different needs. And so how do we address those needs? And what are our needs, in the Northeast and in the Southeast? And so frankly, as a director, what I try to do is continue to look at how we can continue to improve Tulare as we grow, and in every neighborhood, and then making sure that my staff has the resources that they need to be able to do that job, whether they're doing building inspections, whether it's code, or whether it's providing resources, right, through our CDBG grant, Community Development Block Grant too. But with that, I want to pause and just, I guess, open it up to questions. And I don't recall what the time limit is on this, but I just want to be cognizant that I'm not overstaying my welcome here. Any questions? No? If there's no questions, like, oh, there's one. That is an excellent question. And since I don't think he had a microphone, so I'll repeat it a little bit, but he wants to know what are the repercussions when you don't obtain a permit? Because I mentioned some of the benefits of obtaining a permit, but what happens if you don't? Well, a couple of things happen. If you're caught building with a permit and it requires a permit, or building inspectors or a it's a stop work order essentially. So you have to stop work, go to City Hall, get the right permits, get the right plans. That's the short term. And on the long term, it's essentially if it's not a legal permit, and when we have banks or appraisers call to verify, they just take that into account into their valuation. So like if someone has a home and the county assessor's office shows it's a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, and they just added another bedroom and another bathroom, and they're trying to sell it and get the value for it as a 4 bedroom, 2 bath, but it's not legal, they're probably not going to lend against it, or or might have to be cash if they're trying to get that amount of money because the lender's like, well, this isn't legal. If we issue this loan, it's not going to be protected for at that added valuation. They don't count it. So that's the kind of one of the long-term repercussions that could occur. No, that, yes.
Buy a house and find out that this addition wasn't permitted, they usually tear it down because it's a detriment.
Yes, it depends. I will say we're also my staff is very customer oriented. Our inspectors, they always try to, um, they make sure if it's a life safety issue where it's a version that was not made legal, they'll let them know and they'll say, nope, you're gonna have to tear down and start over. But if it's something that can be salvaged, or if it's a lot of times, and we've done this, we've worked with several property owners where, yeah, this wasn't a legal addition or project, but here's what you can do to legalize it and get a permit for it and bring in some plans. At that point, we can almost call them as-built, where you're basically documenting what's already been built, right? Instead of starting over. Yes, yes, they can, and it depends, right? So some things you can't. The other thing too, I mentioned we work a lot with various departments, and we do in a number. We work with pretty much every department in the city, but in different capacities. And one of the ones we work with very closely is code enforcement. And so code enforcement, and I know they'll probably have their conversation coming up. Um, they yes, they enforce the city's code, but really it's to keep the city looking nice but also safety standards, and especially with like housing. If something is unsafe to occupy or it's hazardous, I mean, I've seen some scary examples where somebody was renting this out to someone and I mean, I remember the code enforcement got involved, our fire marshal came over and we're like, this is this close to being an electrical short and, you know, going into flames, and especially if it was a disabled person, they're not gonna be able to get out in time. It doesn't have fire protection. So those are the cases where we see stuff like that. That's an immediate emergency. We need to get that addressed. And maybe somebody cannot be living there until that's fixed, right? But then in some cases, with code enforcement, somebody was using it to grow, drugs or something in the house. And so they've changed all the wiring and it might have to be more of a substantial rehab. But it just depends on the um, I guess the extent of whether it can be fixed or does it need to do we need to start over, so to speak. But yeah, we work with people. That's always the first approach. Can we help them? Uh, uh, Honestly, a lot of our job is education. So one of the things too, we might, even when we catch someone doing something without permits, we give them that opportunity. We're like, and believe it or not, like most people, they're probably like, well, maybe I can get away with it. But there have been some folks that they were trying to do it themselves. They don't have a lot of money. Their family's growing and they want, their kids starting to go to college. They want, them to have their own room and kind of be independent, but still live under the roof. And so they'll just take it on, and they didn't even know that there was a permit process or that you do this. So a lot of the times we do have folks that just didn't know. And so we inform them, this is what the process is, this is how we can help you. So we always try education first and just making sure folks are aware of the, pros and cons. Um, but but in some cases, yeah, you have to start over. And then unfortunately, thankfully, it's a minority of cases where it's like this, but sometimes people are purposely trying to do something illegal or cut a corner or something like that. But thankfully, most of them are not that case. They're either just like, oh, maybe I won't get caught, or they really just didn't know. And so we just try to work with folks.
first-time home buyers, the bank and manage that with the city's cooperation? Is that like a partnership? Or do
Yeah.
they go do that through a bank?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So the way the first time home buyer program, we actually have a partner that we partner with Self-Help Enterprises to administer the program. And so what Self-Help Enterprises does, the city receives the funding, we have the funding available. And so it's this pot of money we have available for this program. And Self-Help Enterprises works with households that are interested. Like, hey, I want to buy my first home. It starts and they do a great job. They start with a financial literacy and education and telling them, well, here's everything you need to be home buyer ready, so to speak, right? And so they look at whether it's their credit profile or do they have their savings and try to get them as ready as possible to take that next step. So they'll work with them on the front end. And once they're ready and they've gone through those steps, they determine, okay, well, here's how much income this household has. And this is what the costs of homes are in our area. And oftentimes what the first buyer program does is it fills that gap of, well, they might have enough, looks like they're gonna be able to afford the mortgage, but they really need help with that down payment. Or maybe they need an additional amount of money for the bank to qualify them. And so the city provides that extra guarantee with self-help. And so
That's a grant, so they don't have to pay it back.
yes, it's kind of like a forgivable, usually it's usually zero interest, or it's like a 1% interest for the life of the loan. And usually the way it kicks in, a lot of the times if you live in the house, if you maintain it as your primary residence for, some of these are long, back in the 90s, they set these like 35-year contracts. They're getting a little shorter now. But if you stay there during the life of the loan, it could be completely forgivable. And then the only thing is, if you sell it before, then you may have to pay some of it back, or in some instances, and this was back when we had what was called the redevelopment agency. We don't have that anymore, but the redevelopment agency oversaw a lot of the programs that now community development handles. So they had a lot of different contracts because our department, our housing and grants division, they also are responsible for overseeing all those loans that are on the books, so to speak. So some of them even had provisions where you don't have to pay it back, but you have to sell it to another family that also qualifies as low income. And then that way, and so it kind of depends on each contract. But the way it works is they can work with their own agent, they can work with their preferred lender. And essentially any lender that would work with someone like a first-time home buyer and be able to receive that assistance would qualify. And so we do tend to have, like self-help will maintain a list of folks that are ready to go essentially once they find a property that works for them within the price point that they need to meet, and have pre-approval from their lender. And we have the funds available, because that's the other thing too, right? With a lot of these programs, we have so many funds, but the need may be up here. So it's always trying to help as many people as we can with the resources we have, and then finding maybe ways to stretch those resources or look for additional funding. But that's, hopefully I answered a little bit of the question there with the first time homebuyer program, and it was helpful.
Do a lot of people take advantage of that?
Yes, but there could be more. One of the things we are working on, and I just mentioned all the things my staff do. And so one of the things we would love to do is have more focused outreach and kind of advertising the program. But the other thing too, like through CalHome, which sponsors that program, the state's frozen the program for a number of years now. So even if we put that notice out there and we had a lot of people applying, we don't have access to those funds until the state basically unfreezes that program. So you have those issues too. And so oftentimes it's trying to do the best you can with what you have. And when we have state funded or federally funded programs, those also come with strings and different things that the city has to follow in order to take advantage of those programs. So it's being aware of those things and how we can work around them or within them, I guess I should say. Anybody have any particular questions about a particular part of town or anything I've talked about at this point in general? No, we're getting close to coming up on the hour. We have a few minutes, but I don't want to keep anyone here any longer, especially with dinner time. As we are. Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll pick it up.
Is there gonna be any new development for the west side? Like
Yes.
anytime soon or like in the future? Like, what's the timeline, do you know,
Development in general or something specific?
in general?
Oh, yeah.
Lonely.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Thank you. I wanted to talk about the West Side and at least some of the things that I think are exciting, some of the things I see, but I didn't know. So I'm glad you asked that question because now I get to. So we have a lot of growth, especially one of the things that's exciting is we're getting new housing on the West Side. So all the new housing does not just need to go on the East Side. We need to have it balanced. And one of the cool things is that we're getting houses being built on all sides of Tulare right now, which is fantastic. That's the best way to do it. And so we have new subdivisions going in. Obviously, everyone's probably familiar with this one that's being built out Liberty Hill around Bardsley and West. We also have DR Horton continues to build out more homes here as well. And these projects are early on. Let me see which ones. I think I can talk about all of them because they've been through site plan review now, so they're public knowledge. They just haven't moved forward with the next step, right? But we have applications for development in this area of new houses. I believe this is the one that was even included a park and some commercial right here on Enterprise and what is it, Inyo. This has also come in to be developed with additional housing. And then we also have this area here around Pleasant, on both sides of Pleasant. That's come in with some maps. So pretty much the last remaining land that we have between where the current houses are to the end of what we call our urban development boundary, where we're approved to grow to, which for us is Enterprise, those are all coming through in different stages of the process. Exactly. So one of the things, another department I work very close department, and one of the things, so we're always coordinating her and I on like, we're basically big cheerleaders and kind of promoters of Tulare and trying to get the retail, trying to get investors. I mean, the housing, we have that happening. We have housing going in everywhere. But some of the other needs that are a little more challenging, whether it's multifamily or commercial, is talking to those folks and letting them know. Like one of the things I like to say is, I said, hey, we have a need for more commercial on the west side. And they're like, okay, well, and then I feel like they're skeptical, or like there must be a reason for that. It's the older part of town. I'm like, look at all the new houses we're building. This is new housing stock. These houses are not cheap. These are people that have jobs, they have income, and I don't like that they have to drive all the way across town to grab a sandwich or to do, just basic needs. And so what we try to do in planning and with economic development is identify sites where we can tell them, like, for example, there's the former dairy site here on West and Pleasant. This is all designated as high density residential development for our housing element. We need to provide apartments here, but that's a big piece of land. So I've been in conversations with some brokers and potential developers about this property and telling them, hey, we need the apartments, but this is so big that you could probably get some retail in there and actually put like a commercial shopping center in there that could help look at all these houses in the schools, right? And West, we had this issue with, the mayor knows this discussion very well. I think we were both maybe a little frustrated, but it was proving a point that when we had a lot of concerns about food trucks and what are we doing to regulate food trucks, there were always food trucks setting up on West Street that our code enforcement was always having to either cite or tell them to come in and get permits. But kind of the story I tell with West Street is a major north-south corridor. A lot of people that work that live on the west side, that's what they use to get their kids to and from school. It's the way they use to get to Visalia, to get to work. And I'm like, well, of course the food trucks are setting up there. Show me the restaurants on that corridor. Show me where are people supposed to stop on their way to pick up breakfast or pick up dinner for the family on the way home. And so I've been telling property owners that own these pieces of land, as well as potential developers and brokers, this is an opportunity here. Like one thing that'll be happening soon, to answer your question, I mentioned the houses on West and Prosperity here, the vacant lot you see. We're inching closer, but we're supposed to get a street light here, which is much needed. And one of the things going in already is as this all gets built out, there's going to be a gas station, but it'll have the convenience store, but next to it, it's also going to have, I think, 1 or 2 spaces where that could be a sandwich shop or it could be something else, which I know is not. They were waiting on the city, I think, to put that signal in. Yeah. And now that that's moving forward, I think
where the signal needs to be as well.
Yes.
And that's been approved for a long time.
Yes, so they have approved plans. They are moving closer to constructing that. I think the ideal would be for both the developer and the city is that they're both out there together and they go in kind of at the same time, so they're not having to tear up the road and then redo it again for both projects. So some of that coordination is going on right
Well,
now.
At E Street in Prosperity as well,
Yes.
we need to kick the benders and get them to get that going. They are doing some work there, so
Yeah.
maybe they're gonna.
Well, I wasn't gonna
Be
name
in
names,
there.
but the mayor, yes, that is who owns the property. That would be, and I've tried to market that property, you know, not overstepping my boundaries and being respectful of the current property owner. But with the sports park and the school across the street, to me, that would be perfect for commercial. Imagine, I mean, even a pizza place and after tournaments and games.
Sports park, and it's just down the street from Western. I mean,
Exactly.
the potential is
Yes.
there for
So
it to be a good business.
part of what we do in community development is making sure it's zoned appropriately. That land is zoned commercial, so if someone wanted to build something there, they could. The other aspect, though, is the infrastructure, and this has been a little bit of a point of pain for me, and I think for Tracy as well, trying to get our local developers to understand, and I hate to use Visalia as the example, but some of those things are doing on South Mooney there, across from Costco. That's what I'm trying to, to have our property owners and developers understand, that you have to be, it used to be like when I was in high school, we could get a Super Target or a Walmart where you'd have these big stores that would come in. They put in all the streets, all of the parking lot and everything, and they build the store, and then you get all the other things that build out. That doesn't happen anymore. Even the big stores like Walmart, they're not building huge stores. Everything, so many people order stuff online, and retail has changed a lot, especially after COVID. And so now everyone's going to smaller stores, and the mall in Visalia, there's like new eateries, but they also put in a bookstore where people go hang out, and there's a grocery store there. There's like, in my mind, if it were me, and I would think with all the empty land they have back there, you build apartments there too, or you build, you know, for maybe students or people that want to be walking distance to all that. But my point is, in those instances, like where they got, what's over there, Texas Roadhouse, I believe, and an Aldi. If you look at it, that has all the sidewalks in, it has the streets are all in. It's ready so that when you're marketing and you want a pizza place to go in here, you tell them, hey, we already took care of all that for you. It cost us some money, but now you can just go pull permits, submit your plans and build your restaurant. And all you have to do is build your restaurant and not build everything else out. It's challenging with some of these undeveloped parcels, because if they were trying to get someone to pay for this and develop without that infrastructure, you're asking somebody to build a restaurant or whether it's a store to say, oh, yeah, I have land. Oh, but guess what? You need to underground the power lines, or you need to finish the street, and so they're just gonna go somewhere else. They're gonna go to a city where that's more ready to go. And so it's trying to educate our development community that it's very competitive now. And we're not getting the big box stores, so we need it's smaller developers. They don't have that much money to put in all of the infrastructure. But if you're willing to do it, you might get better tenants and better offers on the land because now it's improved. But anyway, so those are some of the things we work on. Like here, one of the things too is, right, a lot of kids use this to walk to and from school. And so we don't have, so we try, these are all the station in Tulare. Some of our challenges is some of the older parts of towns were, and so they don't have sewer, they don't have sidewalks, they don't know what happens is when they're part of the city, now it's on the city to fund all that, and that's all very expensive. So it's always a challenge in the property owners, the city has to do ours, but if you put it all on the developer, it's kind of just it, right? So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, on the west side for some of these vacant sites, and then, I mean, even, well, I shouldn't talk about specific property owners, so maybe I'll just hold my tongue, but there's, closer to West and Inyo, right? We have this shopping center and it's heavily utilized because it's really the only shopping center on that side of town. So, I mean, if it were, I always say, if I had all the money in the world and I controlled everything, I would redevelop that and like make it like an outdoor pedestrian mall and put in new things that serve the community. But for now, it's doing a good job because it's in the sense of, at least it's there and with so many limited commercial services. One of the things I'm working on too, we applied for a grant for INYO for complete streets in collaboration with Caltrans, and I'm gonna continue to seek funding until we get this thing overdue. To try to make INYO, I mean, we have dividing the community. And if any of you are familiar with that part of town, there's only a few places where you can safely cross INYO where there's signal. So this project would make it easier to cross. Also, it's a state highway, but there's never that many cars on it. So, but it's very wide and it's 4 lanes. So what happens when you have that? Cars fly and they go really fast and it's very unsafe. We've had a number of fatalities, serious injuries to pedestrians, to bicyclists. So we need to right size it so that cars can still travel on it, but they shouldn't be flying down there. It's going to go a little slower. We're going to have safe places for students to cross to get to school, for families. We also have most of our commercial, right, mom and pop places along INYO there. That's the residential developments on both sides. So kind of use it as the needs of that whole community.
Caltrans is gonna put $5 million into to INYO, that corridor right there, but it's not until what, 2008?
2028. Yeah,
I
they,
mean, 28.
well, and Caltrans, so Caltrans has funded what Caltrans is already going to do and committed to. They have to rehab that whole roadway. And so now they have a policy at Caltrans. Every time they rehab the roadway, they need to see if there's other things they need to do. And so one of the things they need to do, because of the problems I just described, they are going to, I think, go to 2 lanes. So 1 lane each direction.
Roundabouts.
Well, that's what I'm trying to find funding for. So the only thing that's funded through Caltrans is redoing the pavement, restriping it.
Medians, right?
Yes, a
Well,
little bit of the
they're talking
median.
About the roundabouts at Government
Yes.
Affairs Committee that they're doing it, so I don't know.
So that's where we don't have funding. We don't have the funding for the roundabouts. We don't have the funding to fully like put nice bus stops where right now there's just a sign and people standing in the sun. So, that's not, if you want people to take the bus, that's not really encourage that. So we're trying to seek funding through grants, and there's several out signage to really rebrand INYO and this concept in transportation planning, it's going from a highway to more of a boulevard. Because yes, when this was all country, it functions as a highway, but this is a whole community we have here. So this needs to function more as a boulevard. And that it's there for cars and we can get cars through, but also people that want to walk or ride their bike or jump on a skateboard and do it a little more safely, and access these businesses. Part of that too, one of the benefits, right? Okay, we're reducing lanes. Well, we're gaining right of way. So there's gonna be areas where we can have curbside parking where we currently, some people do it maybe illegally now, but now we're gonna have legal curbside parking. So for we've had businesses that have wanted to go in there and then they're like, oh, but I have to deal with Caltrans. Oh, and then now I have to add parking because there's no parking that was developed. That's gonna help all of that. So I think that can be a very transformational project. That's just one example for this specific community. But we're always looking at opportunities like that, in older parts of town, newer parts of town, what's missing, what does the community need? And that's, what we try to do, I guess, every day, whether, like I said, building inspections, administering all our housing, our grants programs, helping our unhoused neighbors, to planning, infrastructure, transportation, working with our engineering department on projects like this. So, I know it's a lot probably. We just started a historic preservation program, which I'm really excited about. I haven't even talked about downtown redevelopment, but we're going, we have a downtown master plan that was adopted. We are actively now taking steps to work with the property owners, and the folks that are investing in our downtown to start implementing the downtown master plan, both through their projects and their buildings and new businesses, but even to placemaking. We're incorporate public art, but also wayfinding and placemaking. So it's an exciting time to be in Tulare. We're all very busy. I think the last few reports I've given to our planning commission has just been, at the end of the meeting, I provided a report, and my report essentially was, our staff is very busy. We have a lot of projects, and it's yes, a lot of new houses. We have some apartments. We have a lot of new commercial. Everyone knows about the new Chick-fil-A, right? So we got plans. I can say that now. It's moving forward. Um, and so it's a great time to be in Tulare because we're growing on all sides of town, but we're also doing, I mean, one of my proudest projects, and probably most people don't even notice it, there's a little duplex across from Cherry. And I worked with a local developer or local developers. There was like a team of 3 that came to me and said, hey, we want to purchase this land, but how do we even build on this? It's like so small. And then the zoning says you need to have a setback this big. And in sitting down with them and looking at it, and looking at what was around there, I'm like, well, there's already multifamily on every side of this intersection except for like on this parcel. And so we had come to plan commission, we sought a variance. Usually for a variance, you're making an exception to the standards. And so you have to justify why. It was really easy in that one because it was consistent with what was to the south of it, to the east a little bit. And it was providing needed housing and such a great success story. I was just talking to him. I probably shouldn't share who lives there. That's probably private information. But let's just say they have great tenants, somebody that really appreciates being in that location. And we have a beautiful new, housing development. And we have little projects like that too. So one of my goals personally is always and I think the city as a whole, talking to our city manager, he agrees, is not only building the big subdivisions out on the outskirts of town, but how can we encourage more of those smaller projects that our locals build, not the big companies, but people in Tulare, which is really cool, really exciting to me, and creating those opportunities. But yeah, we're doing a little bit of everything, a little bit of multifamily, like I said, the commercial side. And so we're staying busy, we're growing. There's a lot more interest from people even outside of the valley, like other developers that see like, wow, you guys are really easy to work with. We can get through permitting in a reasonable amount of time, which is a lot harder in other parts of the state. And so I think Tulare is really, we just got a new tagline, right? With the new logo is opportunity grows here. That couldn't be any truer than it is right now. And so as a staff person, it's exhausting weeks, but it's all good work. It's all for the benefit of the community, and it's a really exciting time really to be involved. I haven't even mentioned the city projects, the amphitheater, the homeless shelter, which we're breaking ground on soon, and there's a lot going on in Tulare. Hopefully, anyone who listens to this at some point, and for you all here, you should feel proud that you live here. My only ask, and what I'll leave you with, is be a partner with us. And what I mean by that, I mean those of you that showed up, like be engaged, be a part of the community. A lot of the times, we know everyone is busy, so to ask you to come to meetings, that's not the only way. But just if you hear, one of the things we're going to try to do as staff when we're planning projects is maybe should have a tent at a community event or show up to the soccer fields or something and meet families where they're already there, because we know everyone's busy, and to ask you to show up to yet another meeting or add something to your schedule. But get engaged. A lot of times we get this room is packed when someone's upset about something or something's about to be approved and they just found out, and it's like, well, be with us from the beginning, like help us plan. In a year or two, I'm hoping we'll be able to start a new general plan update. So that's going to plan the next, 25, 30 years in Tulare, beyond 2035. And so that's a process to find out, what do we want our community to look like? And as staff, it is a lot of work for us, but most importantly, yes, it helps in that regard, but what really helps is just getting that input and knowing that you're part of the process. Because we're a small staff and we can do so much, but when the community is engaged, I think we can have more meaningful projects and advance a lot of other things in our community. And also making sure that we're actually hearing from the community. Like, we may be planning something, but if the community, if that's not what they need, or they really want the city to focus on this, well then, you know, come talk to us. And hopefully not just when we're right about to approve something you hate, but like anytime you have a question. I get calls all the time or emails, stop by City Hall. I always tell my staff, like, do the best to provide information. If you don't know the answer, get people's information, let them know, we'll look it up for them, or we'll get back to them. But a lot of what we do is hopefully share the information, and it's, like I said, it's called community development. So the community plays a big role in that. And so thank you for being here this evening. I don't know if there were any other questions. Oh, applies to you too.
So I know the answer, but I wanted you to
Oh,
explain to
shoot, I don't know if I
people.
do. I'm sorry, what's
So
the best
if
one?
somebody is interested in wanting to know what's going on in our community, what's coming
Ah.
up down the pipeline, where's the best place for them to access that information?
Probably well, there's several places, but I think real easy way, if you go on the city's website, we have our site plan review meetings every Wednesday. They're not public hearings. It's a meeting where the developers or somebody that wants to do something in the city meets with city staff, all the various departments, engineering, planning, fire, police, and any department needs to look at the project, and we review the plan and give them initial feedback. And that's kind of the first stage before someone pulls a permit, right? So even before like Chick-fil-A pulled permits, they first met with us and had a conversation and made sure they understood these are the requirements from the city. Because that, a lot of times, and I always tell folks this, whether it's a company or a new business going in, or even somebody wanting to build a couple of houses or a duplex, it starts with talking to us first, and it's free. That's the other awesome thing for developers, for the community in general. All they do need to have a site plan and show us a sketch of what they want to do, but it's a way for them to know these are the requirements to develop your project before they spend more money, hire architects, engineers to take it further and develop construction drawings to make sure they can do it at that location. Or if they do it at that location, here's what they know they're going to need to account for. And so it's not a public hearing, it's just a meeting with staff, but it is open to the public. So anyone's welcome to drop in. Unless we don't have anything on the agenda, it's every Wednesday at 1:30 PM upstairs in the city managers conference room is what we call it. The big conference room upstairs. If you're ever just interested, you're welcome to sit in and observe and just see, how that process works. But you're also welcome to just reach out to us, and ask, any of my staff. If you go to the community development page, you'll find the contact information. You can call our main line and, be directed to a staff person. There's multiple ways to engage with us. I mentioned social media, I mentioned phone, email, but site plan review is a real easy way to just kind of, oh, I'm curious. I wonder if what's going on this week. And if it interests you, you can show up to the meeting. I know everyone's busy. You're also, if you have questions, you can email or call one of my staff or myself to find out more information. Hey, I saw this was on the agenda. What is this? Or is there anything you can share about it? Sometimes there's confidentiality, but most of the time we tell everyone that meeting's open to the public. So usually if it's on-site plan review, it's kind of, they're fine with it being public knowledge that it's a project and it doesn't guarantee that once they've gone through site plan review, they're actually going to pull permits and build it. But that's usually the first official step before they go further. And I don't know if that was the right answer. Is there something else I left out? Okay. But I know Melissa, she does a good job of, she's responsible for a lot of the information, right? Of like what's going on in the city, and he posted the dinner that we had for our commissioners and committee members, and just so she does an excellent job of that. And I think we're always collaborating on ways, how can we as a city have that information more accessible and that people engage with it, right? And are aware of what's going on. We even have the Ask City Hall. I haven't even talked about that, but that was kind of neat. We got to record little video, like you could ask a question on Ask City Hall. Do we still have it up on the website? And people can ask a question if they have like, hey, when's this park going to be developed, or what's going on over here, or what's the city doing about this? And people can upvote it. And if it gets, more votes for that question, it'll be directed to the appropriate staff member that handles that, the answer to that. And then we record a little video that then people can watch. You can post it on social media, share with your friends, like, oh, look at what I got an, we were asking about what this was, we had this question. Looks like the city answered it. And you can share that information out. So always looking ways to get the community involved. So maybe there's things we haven't even thought of that if anyone ever has an idea, especially looking at our young folks, it's like, how do you guys engage? How do you take in information? Like I remember I was like, I heard from a consultant, nobody's on, I don't even have a TikTok, but apparently like all the kids are about TikTok. And so they're like, if you want to reach the youth, you kind of have to be doing that. And so we're always trying to learn how to engage our community in ways that are relevant.
Did you just say the city manager needs a TikTok account?
Do it. Actually, he might have fun with it. So yeah. All right. Any other questions? No? Thank you so much for being here this evening and for listening to the call. Thank you.
I want to thank Mario, and you can see what a really dynamic job he has for community development. And he is really accessible, he's knowledgeable, and he can explain things. So if you want to meet with him, one-on-one, I would encourage you if you have a lot of questions about the community development, but his whole department works really hard and I get to work with them. I'm lucky enough to work with them when we're talking about the issues of our unhoused. Herself, this is Melissa Herman. She's our city clerk. She also keeps me in line and helps me a lot, as well as every other council member and city staff member. So she's accessible too and can answer a myriad of questions that you may have. So thank you for coming. Our next session will be November the what? 14th. And it's who's going to be speaking? Oh, code enforcement. So that's a really interesting, very time-consuming job as well. And they are working so hard every day. I know one of the biggest issues in our city is the homelessness and our unhoused neighbors, and they're working with them consistently, trying to keep them moving. And it's against the city ordinance to be camping. And so there's a lot of new ordinances that we've passed at city council concerning our unhoused neighbors, trying to get them into the encampment. We're going to break ground soon, I hope. Tomorrow I should get that date on the permanent shelter, which will really change things. So he works tirelessly. And that's just one thing that code enforcement it works on, but I know I can call him almost 24 hours a day and he's, okay, we'll get it done. Yeah, and that's the way our city staff is. And that's why I get a little challenged when people say the city doesn't do anything, because I know how hard these guys work, how hard they work, way beyond their paid time frame. So we're very fortunate to have people like Mario and Melissa on our team. So thank you for coming. See you on the 14th, and you'll learn a lot about code enforcement. Bring the rest of the students in your class. You get credit for this, right? Yeah, so and it was informative. Yeah, yeah, great. All right.
I don't know, I brought pizza.